Well, welcome back, everyone. I do just want to say that it is starting to thunder here on Nantucket, so I'm hopeful that we won't lose power, but we'll see what happens, and that is why we have our tech support and offsite location. But if there is any difficulty there, we will weather it together, as Lisa Craig would say. I'm excited to introduce you to Graeme Durovich. Graeme, if you're there, can you turn your camera on so I know you're there? Yay, there you are. Okay, great. Graeme is the town of Nantucket's recycling and solid waste coordinator, striving for holistic and data-driven approaches to sustainable waste management. Projects that she works on span various waste reduction initiatives, Nantucket's first coastal plastics study, and community education on waste and environmental and human health. I once saw Graeme talk about the ways in which people were more likely to divide up their trash based on the lid color of the trash cans downtown. And that was really, that lesson stuck with me. And to learn how different areas of the island sorted their trash. Some did better than others. So very interesting. Graeme is also the co-organizer of the Nantucket Litter Derby, which I know is a favorite event of many people on the island. Graeme has a master's in coastal and marine management from the University of Center of the West Fjords in Iceland and wrote a graduate thesis on coastal litter. She is also a violin teacher and a Celtic fiddler and is back in graduate school again studying One Health at the University of Alaska. So let's turn it over to Graeme.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to the Nantucket Preservation Trust for inviting me and having me. I'm going to just confirm that you all can hear me.
Can.
Okay, great, thank you. So with sea level rise, obviously, and coastal resilience challenges, changes to buildings are, of course, inevitable, as we heard earlier this morning, touched on, and obviously we're finding ways to adapt. Any such changes usually result in creating items and materials that are no longer needed. So then what happens to those materials when we are adapting for sea level rise or just renovating or taking down a building for other reasons? So we have numerous opportunities to improve our current practices of waste management, specifically with construction and demolition debris here on Nantucket to be more sustainable into the future. And so today I will provide an overview of Nantucket's current practices before we hear from today's other speakers about more sustainable opportunities we can work towards. So I'm really excited about. So give me a second as I share my screen. So to start with, where is away? I talk about away often if you heard me speak before, and usually we're talking about our household trash. That's what we're seeing every day and thinking about a little more often. But where's away when you throw it away? I'll give you a hint. It's not Nantucket when we're talking about construction and demolition debris, or C&D as we say in the industry. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't care about it, right? There's so many reasons we should, even just starting with, from the social justice, environmental social justice perspective. And as we get to where is away, maybe you have connections to that place, and that also brings it, closer. Nantucket's landfill, the only thing that ends up there is contamination from the composter. So any, we see a lot of plastic bags in here, but there's a lot of other stuff as well, creating these bales that are in the landfill, which this is an image of. And so whatever goes into the compostable waste stream that doesn't break down to dirt, so food and paper, obviously, they break down to dirt. Anything else like plastic, that's going to end up in the Nantucket landfill. So what happens to our construction and demolition debris then if it's not going into the Nantucket landfill? Well, it's ending up in a landfill elsewhere. First, it is received here at the Nantucket Landfill Recycling Center and Transfer Station. So way back in the back of the facility behind the drop-off, there is a large warehouse type building where the trucks pull in and dump the construction and demolition debris. From there, it's loaded into a 52-foot trailer. When possible, Waste Options, the town's vendor, pulls off any clean wood, but that's a very, very small percentage, probably averaging less than 5%. And so all the rest of it, you can just think of just all of it, goes off island and on the steamship and goes to Stoughton. So not too far off, but off Cape. And there it's unloaded, and the receiver there recycles what they can. And here's a picture of the facility, and you can just see these massive piles of debris. And they pull off the clean wood, and there's a whole process for it. As you can see here, these conveyor belts with the waste moving down, and people picking off. And then there's also mechanical aspects that separate the different parts. And then all the wood gets turned into this chipped wood essentially. And that's shipped to Quebec, where it's made into particle board. But a very large fraction is not wood, or it can't get reclaimed. Drywall, for instance, with our current practice, we can't reclaim that. And that gets put into a rail car and shipped off to Ohio, where it's received at a landfill there, Sunny Hill landfill. So I'm not sure the percentage at this point. We have a new receiver of our construction and demolition debris. So I'm not sure the exact percentages of what's recycled and what's shipped off to the landfill, but suffice to say, looking at our construction and demolition debris waste stream here that the town receives, we have furniture in there, we have all the odds and ends, basically. A very large portion, definitely over 50%, I would say, is not recycled and is ending up in the landfill. And when we're thinking about Nantucket's construction and demolition debris waste stream, we're looking at between 8,000 to about 10,000 tons a year. And that's just what's received at the municipal transfer station. There's, of course, a private transfer station operated by Miles Reese. And I'm not sure of the tonnages that they're receiving there currently, but that has a similar pathway of getting shipped off island to a receiver, and part of it getting recycled, and ultimately probably part of it getting landfill residuals. So, why should we care? There are more environmental reasons than I'm going to go into today. But you can probably have a good idea. For similar reasons, we care about other waste streams and how they affect the environment. We need to care about the construction and demolition debris waste stream, which has a lot of chemicals in it. But if we're just focused on ourselves as humans and how this directly affects us, we've got the historical significance here on Nantucket as a historical landmark. There goes the thunder. So preserving those pieces, and obviously, that's the where Preservation Trust originally, is coming from. And I love that they are branching out and looking at this much more holistically, and that you all are here joining us. And we have coastal resilience. That's the main part of this main talk about this symposium this weekend, or the end of this week. And so we have adapt and retreat. That's creating new waste streams. What do we do with them? A house I'm currently living in, for instance, It's downtown, and it needs to get moved. It's right there on the water, and it's flood zone, and so everyone's trying to move it. That's involved, and unfortunately, we're hearing that the downtown electricity would have to get shut off for 3 days for the building to get moved. So how do we work around that? Because otherwise it has to come down. And then how do we take it down is the next question. But then climate change mitigation, obviously sea level rise and other climate change aspects are affecting us all, and will increase over time. And anything we can do to mitigate that will help us in the long run. We're depleting our own resources when we're just taking perfectly good items and materials and throwing them away. And we had the shortages of, I think, plywood and lumber earlier. There was no plywood on the island, I heard at one point, and no shingles. So what if we could just reuse a little bit more, rather than seeing perfectly good items ending up in the transfer station to get shipped off island to an end place. And then of course we have declining landfill capacity. So while it's not going into the Nantucket landfill, and we're concerned about our waste for other reasons for the C&D waste, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection did a landfill capacity study a couple years back, and they're expecting that landfill capacity will decline to virtually zero by the end of the next decade. So that's going to be, we're going to have to go further and further. We're already going to Ohio, and there's not much further beyond that. A lot of waste is also going to the deep south, and those landfills are filling up, and so there's not much more space for it to go to, and it's going to get more and more expensive as well. And what happens when we don't have anywhere to go, of course, right? So if we can, prolong the landfill capacity that we currently have, make it last as long as possible, for those little residuals and such that we can't possibly find another way currently to dispose of them. We need to work on it from the design perspective up front. We don't end up with that, of course. Then it buys us a little more time. But if we just continue as we are going, filling up landfills, we're going to be in deep trouble. Boat space, we all are only so familiar on this island of the struggles, especially in the summer, of getting your vehicles on and off the island. And certainly for the last year or so, it's been a year-round challenge. And the town alone, with the town's operation, we're shipping off 3 of these big trucks a day. That's a lot of boat space. And then obviously what Miles Reese is sending off from their transfer station as well. And we just recently, in the last year or so, went from 2 trucks a day to 3 trucks a day. So we're, on in an incline there, and we're increasing what we're shipping off, and what we need to ship off. And of course, it costs a lot. There are tipping fees, obviously, when people bring their construction and demolition debris back across the scale, but a lot of it is, dumped up front in terms of other items in the bulky bin at the drop off, and that also ends up in this construction and demolition debris stream. And it costs about $428 a ton for it to, be received on Nantucket at the municipal transfer station and going to the truck, and then be taken off island and dumped at the receiver in Stoughton. And then there's additional costs with the C&D stream that are monthly fees that the town has to pay with taxpayer dollars to the vendor waste options to cover the cost of this operation. And need I mention that we have an affordable housing crisis here in Nantucket. So there are opportunities, of course, reduce and reuse, that, when we're just throwing away buildings essentially, or even just parts of buildings that those items could go towards, or entire structures even could go towards helping our affordable housing crisis not be so dire. So is there a better way? I've alluded to it a little bit, I mentioned along the way, but we have the reduce, reuse, recycle. And of course, we think of this normally in just our normal household waste streams. And we're great at recycling here on Nantucket, right? We've been doing it since 1996, 1997, thanks to people who came before and put a lot of effort in. But we have this amazing opportunity ahead of us with reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I would throw in refuse. Do you really need a building that big for your purposes? And then repair as well, repairing before we recycle. We have those opportunities when it comes to our buildings as well, of course, right? So why aren't we making use of that? And so typically this is called deconstruction and salvage. So deconstruction, if this is a new term for you, deconstruction is essentially just systematically taking a building apart so that both structural and non-structural components can be reused. They're reclaimed and can be reused in another building in the future, whether it be an existing one or a one getting built. And of course, we should start with, can this building be repaired? Can it be altered to meet the current need? And then if not, can it be moved? And of course, this is a picture that Housing Nantucket has on their website. That's a bit iconic of moving houses here on Nantucket, and Nantucket has a long history of that here. And then if the building can't be moved, what other options are there? So this is where deconstruction and salvage come in, as we try to minimize what needs to be disposed of. And first, of course, when we're talking about disposal, first recycling, and then lastly landfilling. And this is somewhat of a new concept for us here on Nantucket, thinking about it, more towards the policy side. There's a long history of that on Nantucket. I've heard of people having, entire sheds or homes made of things they've salvaged, but there's not a formal program to support this currently. We're hearing from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, as they look more towards source reduction and reduce and repair. They're also looking to see how deconstruction can be implemented across the Commonwealth, and how reuse can be built into our building codes. So that's a little bit of an introduction into deconstruction and salvage. I am going to let the other speakers later today speak a little bit more about that, because they have that going on currently in their communities, are working towards that and are much further along. And I'm looking forward to hearing from them and hearing what we might be able to apply here. So, why can't we use the take it or leave it though for salvage? For those of you familiar with Nantucket, you'll of course recognize this well-known, beloved place. I'm really hopeful that it will be open by the end of the year. We're working on staffing and hiring challenges to get to that point, hopefully soon. So why can't it be the take it or leave it? And I've heard in the past that the take it or leave it might have accepted more building materials. And sadly, it's not something that the take it or leave it can currently handle. As you can see here, it's partly because it looks like this, of course. So one key aspect that we need to understand about the take it or leave it, one, we need to have it much more organized and a better place for reuse, because people bring, there's a lot of wacko things that come into the take it or leave it that really don't belong there, including hazardous waste. And I've seen prescription medications, and then also items that are just not in conditions that can be reused. And we see this starkly at DPW, at the Department of Public Works that I work for as part of the town, when we clear out the take it or leave it weekly. when it's open. So each week, the entire crew drops everything else, nothing else happens, typically Thursday mornings, and everyone goes over and empties out the entire take it or leave it. I really didn't believe that until I saw it myself 2 weeks in succession. I was like, how could so much stuff accumulate in just 1 week? And it comes to over 4 tons averaged over the entire year. So each week, there's about 4 tons, an average of 4 tons that is cleared out from the take it or leave it. So while we think of this, the take it or leave it as this really sustainable, both from a fiscally, environmentally, and a socially sustainable perspective, it really is not as much as we would like to think it is, sadly. So while we desperately need the take it or leave it, we also need a better take it or leave it. And that goes from probably refusing some of the items that people would like to bring in that's truly trash. And also taking a little bit more responsibility for our items before we take it to the take it or leave it. Can we, first, of course, reuse or repair it ourselves before we try to find a new home for it? Can we find a new home for it with somebody specific, and you can make sure it actually is going to somebody who wants it before you drop it off to this, catch-all take it or leave it, where you don't know whether it's going to go to somebody who can reuse it. So keep that in mind when the take it or leave it opens, hopefully soon, and try to make sure your items go somewhere good, where they're going to get reused. And it goes back to waste reduction on the head end, and not buying things if we don't need it, and trying to find things locally, maybe from one of our consignment groups, or even take it or leave it before you go buy something new. So that's one of the concerns, certainly, when we look at a salvage operation here on Nantucket for construction items that would have been reclaimed from buildings. How do we set that up so that it is safe? One, we could have a situation like this with construction materials, and then also so it's easily usable by the building industry and those that need it. So that's what we would need probably, and that's why take it or leave it would not work for as is. Take it or leave it as is would not work for that. And I think ultimately we're looking towards perhaps a warehouse is what the island would need, and it might turn into perhaps a public-private partnership to make something like this happen. We're just trying to get the wheels turning. Someone would be really interested in that. That would be great for us to be moving in that direction as we look for opportunities for ourselves here on the island. And I'm excited to also share with you that as we work towards trying to find what those solutions might be that are not take it or leave it, that could be better for us than take it or leave it, and more effective and efficient and safe for everyone, that we have a group of WPI students joining us this fall. Holly Backus, the preservation planner, Lauren Sinatra, the energy coordinator, and myself will be working with them. And they are going to be looking into deconstruction and salvage, mainly the deconstruction aspect from a policy standpoint. What kind of approach could we take as a town and as a community in requiring deconstruction, and all that entails, what permits might be needed, and so forth. And I'm also delighted that I'm able to share that Remain Nantucket is hiring a consulting firm, EPB US, to do a collaborative feasibility study with Nantucket Preservation Trust on what an architectural salvage initiative might look like on Nantucket. So there's forward momentum here. It's exciting to be here at this point on this island, as we are working towards more sustainable initiatives with handling our waste. So keep your ears out and stay connected with the opportunities and the future of what that might look like up here on the island. So, in the meantime, while we work on these opportunities, what are our current local opportunities that are available to us? You can always check in with local organizations. Nantucket Habitat for Humanity often can take items. They don't have storage, unfortunately, so that sometimes limits their abilities to take building and construction supplies before they need it. Housing Nantucket also could be in need of whatever items you're looking to get rid of. Resale on the Rock as well. They do furniture as well as I saw some building and construction materials recently that they were looking to pass on. And, you know, all the thrift shop, some of the thrift shops, for instance, hospital, they take furniture, for instance, and other consignment stores on the island. There are opportunities on local websites, you know, Craigslist, Nantucket Reuse Exchange. And then if you're on Facebook, there are numerous different groups that you can post different items on for free, or if you want to try to sell them, and try to keep that, you know, the economy of used building supplies moving around the island, I guess, in that way. And if you want the links to these places or want to look at them later, if you Google Nantucket Take It or Leave It and go to the town's webpage for the Take It or Leave It, these groups and pages are all posted there, and you can find the links there. And I'm sure, of course, there are other reuse opportunities that I am not aware of, especially in this newer sphere that we're going into with construction and demolition debris. So please do let me know. It's exciting to hear from, you know, all corners of people who are already doing this and already have systems in place as we look to, you know, more formalize these systems and make them more widespread on the island. And additionally, there are people working in the trades locally with experience and knowledge in deconstruction. So if you're looking to, you know, do a renovation or are in a situation with where you need to do a demolition, ask around. There are people out there who can do it currently and have that knowledge. But more than anything, as I said in the beginning, you know, I just wanted to present to you all where we are currently, what we're currently doing with our construction and demolition debris, and build awareness around that and discussion around that, so we can find a better way forward into the future. And I look forward to hearing from our speakers later today as we work towards that and learn what other communities are doing. And I would love to hear any questions, comments, ideas as we go down this road together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Graeme. I feel like I'm in that Tuckernut cottage that Nathaniel was showing, because I only have one lamp in my office now that there's no sun in the sky here on Nantucket. You know, I was really interested how you started off. I know Matt Oates, who is an artist who uses a lot of recycled material, is always saying that there's no such place as a way. And I think that's kind of the takeaway from here, is we're on the faraway island, but there is no such place as a way. It's going somewhere. You end on this beautiful slide of Nantucket's conservation land and our open space. And I would love to see, as we go further, sorry, the rain is pelting my windows here. As we go further with this feasibility study to talk about architectural salvage and deconstruction, I would love to see visually where Nantucket, and I think other communities could do this too, who export their waste anywhere, although I don't know if anybody's doing it to the extent that we are, in that we're out here in the middle of nowhere. It'd be great to see a map of where all of our open space is overlaid with, if we were to actually have to deal with our own trash, where would that end up? So I think just as we think about Nantucket being a national historic landmark, we are a resource that is important to the country, but we also need to think about how do we interact with the rest of the country. And I know we've got some folks on the call here from other states, I think even from Ohio. So I would be, anyways, it's all very interesting. And I think it's really eye-opening. When you first told me about the waste, how many trucks were going off and then how many trucks come back on to bring building materials over. It's pretty staggering. Does anyone have any questions while we're waiting for any questions or comments, or just even ideas you've seen in other communities where you think, hey, why isn't Nantucket doing this? I noted last night at the select board meeting, Erica Mooney was talking about the number of house moves and modular move-ons that are happening over the next, there's 2 moves a week scheduled for the next, till the end of the year. So we often hear if you have to move it more than twice, it's very expensive. But I think, one of the things about, and the opportunity about Nantucket is we're sending so much of our waste off island already. So if we're doing that, could it be repurposed in a better way? Wow. Some torrential rain here. I don't know. What's one thing you would change, Graeme, if you were, you could wave a magic wand?
Oh, one thing. I would love a place, a space for salvage. I hear that there are people who really want to do it, and people ask, why can't people go back to the wood pile or the scrap metal pile anymore? And unfortunately, there was a death years back, so it's a safety issue. But a space where it is safe to find materials for those who are interested in doing that. And certainly, as we saw lumber prices skyrocket this year, I think it would have also pushed people, even if they were not interested in it for an environmentally sustainable reason, fiscally, it would have made sense to start sourcing perhaps from other places here on island, with reclaimed wood, for instance. But yeah, changing mindsets of what's possible, really. And then how do we make that our status quo of how we interact with our buildings as they need to change.
One thing that I know we've discussed is in terms of coastal resiliency, what might happen if there is an area of the island or there's a home, and we've seen houses that have had to be taken down before the sea splinters them across the beach. And will we be seeing more of that with these increasing storms, with sea level rise and climate change? And where is that building material going to go? One thing I would be interested about, and I think maybe it sounds like something the WPI students could help with, is trying to figure out what is the cost, to do like a one-to-one comparison for mechanical demolition versus deconstruction.
Right, and one of our challenges here, and I think hearing from the speakers later today will be interesting, because I think they're coming from 2 very different communities in a way, in the approach to this. One of our challenges here in Nantucket is that we have more work than the people in the trades can get to. You have to wait so long to get anything done. So whereas in many communities this could be an opportunity to create jobs, that's really not. We don't need more jobs here in Nantucket. We have plenty of work. So that's going to be one of the challenges: is how do we shift some people who are in the building industry with those skills to doing that deconstruction work, instead of the less skilled just knocking it all down, loading it up, and taking it to the transfer station to get shipped off island. Because just as skills go into building a building, also for taking it apart in such a way that those materials can go to good use elsewhere. So that will be interesting to see how our community figures all that out.
You know, I've heard people say that when a building is designed, it's designed to stand there. It's not designed to be taken down. However, you know, going back 200 years, the timber frame construction that was so popular on Nantucket, those buildings were built to be able to be disassembled and moved. So it's interesting that those older traditional building methods are more in line. I don't know. So much of this sustainability is going back and looking and seeing what people of the past were doing. We do have a question about plastic bags. I often wonder why we use plastic bags that are not biodegradable for biodegradable waste, as in, so in Nantucket, there is a plastic bag ban, but you do bring your trash to the dump in a plastic bag. Is this because biodegradable bags are not readily available to us, or because they would muck up the works in some way? I have also, on a similar note, heard that our corn-based plastics don't actually process easily or well inside the community's composter. Is this accurate?
That's a great question, and it's a question I have as well, both. And, you know, I don't want to get too much into plastic bags and that right now, taking us away from what we're talking about, but in terms of the Preservation Trust Symposium, but the plastic bags that we use for trash, you know, it's just another single-use plastic, as it sounds like you're aware of. And the question is whether, you know, we could switch to compostable plastic. And I'm hesitant to recommend that to the town until we know that that actually works. Of course, we're also just switching to another single-use type of material. The composter is so filled with contamination, we have to screen it after 3 days. Everything goes through the composter. It's an in-vessel composter. It gets screened. And at that point, anything screened off is the contamination. It gets landfilled. And then, you know, everything that falls through, the dirt essentially, continues through the composting process for another 7-8 months. And when you speak with people in the compostable plastics industry, they estimate those bags take a minimum of 2 weeks. I've seen some break down a little faster, you know, those thin produce ones at Stop and Shop, for instance. But it's so hard to know. And we've tried to run several tests through the composter, getting, you know, more and more intensive, but we've been unable to get results just because there's so much contamination. So the best way to know, and actually the best solution would be if we could get no contamination going into the composter, because then we can remove the screener actually, and we could let all the compostable plastics, regardless of whether they broke down in the in-vessel composter in those 3 days, we can let that all continue through the system, and those, you know, 8 months would give it enough time to break down. So that's actually the best solution. We do have a bag breaker that we just got here on the island, which will be breaking the bags apart before they go through the composter. So that will minimize the number of bags. But, you know, that all has to get disposed of as well. I'll leave it there for right now. Thanks.
Thanks. I think you have one of the most interesting jobs on Nantucket. And so everybody wants to ask you questions once they've got you pinned down. So I appreciate your time with us this morning. And if there aren't any more questions, then I think we will. I know our next session starts at 11:15. And our next presenter is actually overseas right now. So we can't get her on any earlier. So it will be right at 11:15. So I hope that you'll all come back and join us. We'll be hearing from Christiana Ringer. Christiana she's a Nantucket High School grad. She's just graduated from Elon University. And she worked with the Nantucket Preservation Trust in the DPW bit this summer to do a little bit of a survey to figure out what are the attitudes towards architectural salvage on the island, and is that something that'd be a possibility? So we're getting the idea to find out what's happening on Nantucket, what isn't happening, and then this afternoon we'll be hearing from folks in Portland, Oregon, and San Antonio, where they've got these deconstruction initiatives much further along. So it'll be interesting to hear where we are and where we could be. And I hope that you're thinking about where your own community is and where you might want to go. I think this is an opportunity to just reevaluate the way that we've always done things. Here we are online. Here we are. Everything has changed so much in the last 18 months that there's no reason why we can't make these changes that would really make these places that we care about more sustainable. So look forward to talking with you all more at 11:15. Thanks, Graeme.